Hey y'all, welcome back. I just got back to the US a couple of weeks ago. I think about a week and a half ago I got back to the US. But even flying back, I knew something was wrong. This really isn't going to be that much of a positive video, but I knew something was just off. You could feel it in the air. It just reeked of death. And turns out I was right. So there's been a lot of depression going on, suicide, and I just want to say now, if you have mental illness, please go and receive help from a professional. This is just me talking about shadow work. So dealing with depression in the internalized self and confronting your emotions. I'm sorry, I hope this video won't shake the whole time. I'm putting my phone on top of my laptop right now. Alright, I'm back. The video cut off because apparently I ran out of storage. So, dealing with the depression in the internalized self. Depression, it can cause deep emotional pain, both to yourself and to people around you, whether it be close family, friends, and you have to watch out for it. Even the Greeks knew that the gods or goddesses would punish them if you ignored these sorts of things. Because ultimately, if you ignored them, that same thing became the one who turned against you and or destroyed you. You look at Odysseus and Athena and Poseidon situation. Odysseus ignored Athena and Poseidon, in which he was ultimately destroyed before Athena refound her favor with Odysseus, because that favor was never lost. She was just upset. But you look at the story of Epigon, something like that, the daughter of Icarus. No, not the daughter of Icarus. Anyways, it's Icarus in Epiphone's story. Excuse me if I'm saying it wrong, but the amount of deaths that occurred within that story, a suicide, a murder. I mean, you look at Icarus, he flew too high from his own ambition, blinding himself with the sun, ultimately falling to his death. So when we speak of shadow work, it is any part we disown within us, which ultimately turns against us. It is the personal shadow, which represents a collection of disownment. Everything that we've disowned within ourselves goes within the shadow. The shadow self can operate on its own and without our full awareness. The conscious self goes on autopilot while the unconscious rules us. It maintains control. So we do things we normally would not do. Things we would involuntarily do and that you later regret. We say things we wouldn't say. Even the things we express, like emotions, we don't consciously feel. Remaining unconscious of the shadow can hurt anyone, even those that we love and trust. That's why you have to get your shadow under your control. We project onto others anything that we bury within us. This doesn't mean that the person, I mean, how can I say? So when you get irritated by someone and they're being rude to you, it's a pretty good bet that you have not owned the rudeness within you. Which means that if rudeness did not preside within you, within your shadow self, someone else's rudeness would not bother you that much. But this process, it happens unconsciously. It doesn't happen consciously. We are not aware of our projections. And that is why we have to tame our shadow self. Our egos use this mechanism of projection to defend itself, to defend how it perceives itself. Because these false identities, what we perceive as being good, keeps us from connecting to our shadow. And these projections, they distort reality. They create a boundary between how we view ourselves and how we behave in this reality. A thick boundary between the two, which could even lead to delusion. Now for the empath, because I'm an empath, and it's a lot more difficult for us empaths. It's a big difference between being empathetic and being empathic. An empathetic person has the ability to understand and share feelings of another. Basic. Not saying that you're basic if you are empathetic, but an empathic person is a person who has the ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. Not only being able to understand and share the feelings of another person. Really, it doesn't even have to be a person. It could be anything. So, although the concept of being an empath may sound... Hold on one second. Okay, so although the concept of being an empath may sound like it's the same thing, it is not. Because they're very distinct from each other. Did I move this upwards? Okay. Whereas the empath can literally feel what another person is feeling. It could be emotionally, mentally, even physically. However, when dealing with shadow work, we're dealing with the death of the self going through its death process. It is very different than self-sacrifice. I know I've talked about self-sacrifice before. But I know I've talked about self-sacrifice on this channel before, but shadow work process is very different. Shadow work is when the person is actively denying the self. And then confronting it. Everything we see as incompatible of who we don't want to become, that we see as unacceptable, goes within our shadow. Anything incompatible with our chosen conscious attitude about ourselves and who we are goes to this dark side, and it becomes part of the shadow. The personal shadow is the disowned self. The shadow represents the parts of us we no longer claim to be our own, including inherent positive qualities. These unexamined or disowned parts of our personality don't go anywhere. Although we deny them in our attempt to cast them out, we don't get rid of them. We repress them. They are a part of our unconscious. That same unconscious that rules itself when you're not aware of your own shadow. Because unconsciousness is everything we are not conscious of. We can't eliminate the shadow. It stays with us as a dark brother or a sister or that thing that keeps us awake at night. But trouble arises when we fail to see the shadow, because it's usually standing right behind us. And it starts at an early age, usually when you're about 0 to 5 years of age, when aspects of ourselves are repressed by negative cues within our environment, negative sanctions. Let's say maybe you got anger when you were a child and threw a tantrum, and your parents instituted a negative sanction, let's say sending you to your room or putting you on a punishment. Sometimes you did nothing wrong and you were ridiculed and sanctioned anyways. These sanctions have a significant impact on our behavior. And sometimes, even if you were acting boldly, expressing yourself creatively, you could have still been sanctioned negatively by, let's say, your teacher or someone you admire and had a significant intensity or attachment to. But whenever these sanctions occurred, it might have happened often, but it threatened one of your basic needs, the disapproval, rejection, or trust or love. Parents threatening your safety. Was it all jeopardizing our need to belong? But we adjust our behavior to gratify the needs, and we learn to adapt to the external world. But sometimes we not only adjust for our needs, but for other people too. So how do we come back? How do we process shadow work? How do we do it? How do we dive into it to retrieve ourselves, the true nature of ourselves? First, you start by centering yourself and giving yourself compassion, self-love, self-acceptance. A good YouTuber to watch is Till Swan. She talks all about shadow work process, self-acceptance, and self-love. Also, meditation to stay aware of the present moment without involving the inner self, the critic within, to allow judgment or degradation. The process of self-reflection to observe and to evaluate the feelings and emotion and the emotional reactions within without judgment or criticism. Self-honesty and integrity. The willingness to see unpleasant attributes in our behavior and personality. Ultimately, by dealing with the ego in its process of repression. The ego spends all day and it exerts so much energy to try burying the past and the skeletons within, the skeletons inside of your closet. But to take an honest look at your attitudes, behaviors, dark thoughts, and emotions requires courage. It requires compassion. However, the discomfort can be hard and painful, but the reward is worth it. Being honest and confronting your shadow helps heal your mind and the self. Another thing to do is journaling. Write down what you're going through. It may help you to analyze um, exactly what you're going through and how to deal with it, how to approach it by seeing it in writing. Also, you can use mirrors to tackle the self. Like you see here, I have a mirror there. I have mirrors all over this room, about 9 in this room. But using mirrors to tackle the self, when you take the mirror and you look into the mirror, you're looking at who you are. You're looking at what you have become. Most of the time, you argue with people who try to tell you who you are, who try to put you in a box, make preconceived notions about your existence. But when you look into the mirror, there is no one to argue with because you're looking at yourself. You're looking at your life, how nasty you are to people. Across your forehead, when you look into the mirror, is a title, and your name has a title attached to it because you are looking at your life. But right now, this is the time to process, to dive within the shadow. Don't go too high, well, don't think too highly of yourself and blind yourself of what you should actually be doing. And don't dive too far into the depths of yourself to where no one can reach you. But you need to remain and stay in a constant flow. It's flux that you're going in to maintain the inner workings of the shadow and actually deal with it and process those emotions. Like Persephone, she who goes into the underworld, who dives into the darkness. Well, more like she is dragged into the darkness, and with her returns a new light. Or Hecate, who traverses the darkness willingly with her torch and flame. What we need to remember about this time is that it is our time to go into the darkness, to go into the self, to retrieve what we need, and to return when the light brings a new day. It is about the willingness to suffer for this great power that we have. It comes at a price. And that price is to also endure the suffering of this great power. To have a better understanding of what we have. There is a great burden that we must carry. Even if it's not going into our own shadow. Because this whole time I've been surrounded by death and darkness. But I knew it was coming. Oops, sorry about that. I knew it was coming. And I posted an Empowerment of Witches Coven that's ran by a YouTuber. And I asked, I was like, how can one know what's coming and do nothing to stop it? I believe now that it is not our job to try to stop it, but to bear witness. However, we need to dive into this darkness in order to deal with it, to confront it, to not get rid of it because you can't. But after you deal with it, you need to make yourself whole again. Because to find out who you truly are, you must discover what you are not to determine who you are. And by acknowledging this process, by actively going through it and surviving it, you can re-own your image. You can re-own the self. You will have power over the self, which is the first task of the witch. And after you gain this control, you would have actively dealt with the shadow self. And this is what shadow work is. So I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. Even though this is a dark topic, even going into Christmas, but I hope you all have had a wonderful Christmas. Have a happy New Year. Comment below with your New Year goals, your New Year resolutions, maybe some witchy goals of the year. And spark up a conversation. I would love to get your thoughts on the topic. And see you next time. Bye.